All right, let's do this. Today we are going to be doing Voidscarred by Mike Brooks, narrated by Nathan Priestley. Runtime is 10 hours and 11 minutes. And yeah, so bookkeeping out of the way, summary time. Life as a Corsair is shorter than any other of the Asuryani. It is chaotic, brutal, and requires coming to terms with the knowledge that the spirit stone which prevents she who thirsts from consuming your soul most probably not be recovered, instead end up lost or destroyed. It is to this life that Myrin Stormdawn, leader of a fleet bound to the Starsplinter Corsairs, finds himself. The glorious freedom it allows makes it so that he can experience what is probably the closest thing that any Eldari can experience of life before the fall of their once great empire. Yet now Myrin finds himself hunted by an Ork warfleet bent on killing him and enslaving Eldari in droves. The intrigue and politicking common to Eldar is a deadly dance, and Myrin must find allies in order not just to survive, but to prevail against an entire Ork Freeboota clan flying the colors of the Badscab Buccaneers, led by Uzgul the Magnificent. Yeah, it's a pretty wild ride. As far as characters go, Myrin Stormdawn, he's pretty much like the premier. He is the main character. He's a Corsair captain of the Starsplinters. It's not the life that he would have like actually truly chosen, though it does seem, as far as Eldar like go, you're a Corsair. It's kind of built into your DNA because like you get to a point where you just want to like do your own thing. It's not a phase mom, but like a path, and then they just kind of do their they do their thing. But I'm also not an Eldar like fangirl, so I don't know. But yeah, it does seem like, as far as this book is concerned, the Eldar that show up and claim themselves as Corsairs or following the path of the outcast, they just like truly, I don't see them like in any other cast, or path, not cast, but I don't see them doing anything else, or like living on a craft world, or being an Exodite, or going to Camorra. Like, I just don't see it. So yeah, there is an excerpt from the book that I'm going to read. It's he might have cut himself off apart from the path Ilmarin had laid out for him, but that did not make him uncaring for his fellow Eldari. Indeed, it might be argued that he cared too much. Had the Seer Council of Ilmarin been more willing to take action to safeguard the future of all Eldari, rather than be content to skulk through the shadows between the stars in hopes to avoid notice by any notable powers, Myrin and his fleet might still be there now. So ultimately, he's charismatic and an effective leader who isn't apologetic about his actions. To those closest to him, he requires absolute obedience and dedication. In return, he brings his crew and his fleet the glory that they desire. In some ways, he is more idealistic than any Eldar I've ever seen, but in other ways, he is way more violent than others. Or I guess not violent, but like uncaring. I don't know. Anyways, Zila Flickerstep, a former witch from Camorra. She is the first mate of Myron's fleet. There's not much to her, but it's interesting to see Dark Eldar that has abandoned its former life. There's a much more detailed explanation for why she left life in Camorra, but in brief, it is due to the fact that she was tired of living a life that was so bleak and where everything was in service to self-service. She saw the lifestyle within the Dark City as just as much of a cage as the life that was set for Eldar that chose to live on craft worlds and committed to their separate paths. Her Camoran roots make her uniquely distrustful of anyone and can spot a plot or deception almost immediately. There is loyalty there, though, but thankfully she isn't a character that falls into the hard exterior but soft, lovable interior. She's truly just like Spiky through and through, that is a trope that I despise with every fiber of my being. As far as red shirts go, within like Myron's crew, you've got Israel, Tanareth, and Janandra. You also have Elisar, but he shows up, he's more recurring than not. And he does have minor roles. So he's a captain of a ship called the Yearning Star. And the only reason I bring him up is because he does, like I said, he plays a minor role throughout the story. And I won't like go super deep onto him. But he is someone to kind of keep an eye on if you do read him. Tanar Leothrin, he is an admiral of the like renegade fleet that ends up joining Myron's from the craft world called Ilmarin. In another life, he had been an aspect warrior, so before even being an admiral, He was an aspect warrior, and his role in the book makes it so that he is complicated and ends up having to wrestle with basically his former life as a craft world colliding abruptly with life as a Corsair. So we see former ties and loyalties being challenged throughout the book, and new lifestyles basically needing to be adopted. It does, honestly, I would be annoyed by this type of story being put center stage, but I know so little about the Eldar, and they do get so little screen time that I was intrigued, and I liked it because I don't know, the amount of times that Eldar get real screen time, even in their own books, is like, it's so small. But yeah, so it gives an oddly large amount of personality to the usual stoic, brooding, overly poetic characters that Eldar usually play. So it's a nice kind of refreshing take on that type of story, but also just Eldar in general. Warlock, he's a warlock. Rathar Kildron. He's a very cut and dry character who still largely considers himself aligned with Ilmarin, but is seemingly more loyal to Leothrin than the craft world. We don't get much about him, though, which is a shame. If anything, he provides a pretty sobering presence, since he keeps up the craft world composure pretty much the entire book. He becomes essentially like a palate cleanser. Whenever things get too Corsair-y, then Rathar shows up, and you're just like, yes, back to business. So yeah, he's definitely stays classic Eldar throughout the book. As far as orcs go, I mean, there's more Eldar than this, but these are like the important ones. Or not even the important ones, but these are the ones I can talk about in the, like, you know, without being overly obnoxious about every single character that shows up. For the orcs, the important characters are Uzgul the Magnificent and Gazruk Hackspanner. So with Uzgul, he's a war boss of the Badscab Buccaneers, a freeboota fleet. He's apparently strange for an orc. Beyond his competence in like space warfare and how successful he has been and how long-lived he is, it's his dedication to make the Daka planet. So there's a planet called the Daka planet. It's a regular normal planet, but they named it the Daka planet because they've done some alterations to it. Basically, his goal, which is the goal alone is what makes it weird. But his goal is to turn a space, like a planet, into some kind of spaceship. And it's the time span, the amount of time that he's put into making this planet into a spaceship that makes him strange. Because most orcs they don't have that level of attention span. Anyways, okay, the Gazruk Hackspanner, he's a bad mech of the Badscab Buccaneers. He is the lead mech or head mech. I don't know. I don't even think orcs really view it that way, but he's the guy you go to when you want something done in the fleet. He's charming, and I wouldn't change like literally anything about him, because he's basically just, if you've read any other orc book and you've talked to a mech boy, or I guess read about a mech boy, he's that. He's just archetypal, I should say, of a bad mech, which is great, because orcs are awesome, and especially Mike Brook orcs. They're very pleasant to be around. But that pretty much closes us out with all the characters. As far as the lore and homework section, I actually have a decent amount this time, because like while it is a self-contained story, enough like setting exploration happened where I felt compelled to kind of like write stuff down. So for those who know a lot about the setting, probably skip this section, because I'm going to say stuff that you're like, yeah, we've known this for years. But for those that are trying to like get their foothold in the setting, then we got some lore to talk about. And also, to answer the question of, does this book become homework? No, not really. There's nothing narrative defining about this. Yeah, it's very self-contained. So this doesn't become like homework for the Indomitus Crusade or the Indomitus timeline, or like finding a Crone Sword or something random. But yeah, so on to the lore. For those that don't know, the Eldar don't use the warp to travel the galaxy. So both in space and on land, they'll use what are called waygates, built way back when, and they use those, and they're put throughout the entire galaxy. We've seen them in like a bunch of different novels we've talked about on this channel alone, but also just know that there's way gates everywhere. And sometimes they just pop up because the plot demands it. So yeah. And way gates are different than dolmen gates, because dolmen gates they still use the webway, but they're the Necron's take on way gates. But they're different, I promise. But we're not going to talk about dolmen gates. We're going to talk about way gates. The Eldar use them instead of the warp to basically pop around the galaxy, and they are faster and they're safer and they're more gooder, and they come in a bunch of different sizes. So like the biggest way gates can like literally an entire craft world can fly through them, and then the smallest ones can be like a doorway for like a single Eldar. And as far as we know, we can't make any more way gates. So I mean, maybe in the Black Library or Comoran technology has come like a really long way, because they don't use Psyker stuff anymore, so now they're experimenting and stuff. And the Harlequins, they're masters of the webway, and Kegarak, the sole remaining living Eldar god, might actually tell them how to make one if they ask nice enough, or they already know and they just aren't sharing it. And then there's speculation in the book also that new waygates and new parts to the actual webway, like the characters speculating are like, as far as we know, we don't know, but we also know the Farseers and like the general vibe of the upper echelons of Eldar society are very secretive, and they like to keep like incredibly important information to themselves until it's useful. Basically saying there's possibly a way to make more webway stuff. They're just not divulging that. So yeah, moving on. So on Komorra, the threat of the warp in the webway is so great, the Supreme Overlord, his name is Vecht, has ruled that any with Psyker gifts are to be killed immediately, no matter the circumstance. So at this point, the Dark Eldar have progressed so far down this like course of action that they don't possess much, if any, like true Psyker gifts. I knew that they suppressed their gifts, but until this book, I had never really looked into like exactly how the Dark Eldar went about enforcing the Psyker ban amongst its people. I honestly thought, because like I just thought that they like bred for it essentially, and then if you did have one, they would like banish you or something. But Dark Eldar are violent, and I should know better. So yeah, they just kill you. I also didn't know that given time, an Eldar could regain or grow back their Psyker traits to an extent. That's cool, because that's what Zila's doing. She's like actively trying to like get her mojo back. I mean, it is acknowledged in the book that even like they can't just get their mojo back to any like real prevalent capability comparable to like another Eldar, but they can like exercise it and bring up what is some type of talent, which is cool to hear. So I didn't know that was even possible, because they're talking about it like it's a muscle. So I kind of wonder if humans, because like there's been a lot of Psykers throughout the books that I've read, but I've just never had it touched on if you can kind of progress through power levels by training your Psyker gifts. I thought you were just born with the power level you were born with, and that was just it. So yeah, I don't know. The fact that Dark Eldar turned from the life of the Dark City, Zila's basically whole backstory is what I'm talking about. So it's more of a nugget of lore than anything truly important to the overall narrative. It's just something that like genuinely leapt out at me because I want to throw this in. It just adds a lot more flavor to the setting when you see people within it have the agency to make bigger changes than just picking what they'll specialize in within their birthplace. And I won't go super in depth on this, but chapter 7 has a good long excerpt about like why she left the craft world and why other Dark Eldar sometimes also do the same kind of thing. So, because she's not like the first and only. She's just like one of like a few that have. So yeah, anyways. So something else I want to talk about was the kin. So the Leagues of Votann, they do occur in this. They trade with like anybody. It was just really cool to see their outpost because it's inside of a void whale, which is awesome. This is a lot more speculative point than anything, so far as the fact that the Leagues of Votann trade with pretty much anything that isn't chaos related or chaos adjacent. That's actually like true fact. That happens in the book. But the speculation is that if there is going to be some kind of alliance of peoples that form within the setting, I can easily see it being started within the realms and trading posts of the kin. Like, there's already a lot of intercultural exchange that happens with commerce, since you have to like learn the language and you have to expose yourself to other species' culture and all that jazz. So if 40K ever does start kind of leading or going into like a brighter dawn things, or like things are better when we all hold like hands, like galactically, I could swallow the justification that like the leagues of Votann kind of got the ball rolling because of how they just enjoyed, or not enjoyed, but like they just traded with like anything with a heartbeat. I'm not endorsing that. I do like the grimdark setting for what it is, and especially how the setting is right now. But you know, settings change, things change. We're approaching like a 40-year-old setting at this point. So if it ever does turn into like a Federation Star Trek experience, fine, but at least justify it somehow. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the lore and homework section. Onwards to the who's it for. So if you're starved for like Eldar books, or you're wanting an introduction to Eldar stuff, where they are like the sole and primary protagonists, then this is the book for you. If you aren't, stay away from this book, because like the orcs probably make up like, and not including the end, because the end is still Eldar. Their orcs are in it, but like it's from Eldar POV. So the orc dedicated chapters make up maybe like 2 or 3 chapters out of this entire like 30 chapter book. So like if you don't like Eldar, don't do it. Yeah, anyway, the fact that it's Eldar for me is nice, since I read and reread any book that I review on here a few times, just to make sure that I'm getting the most out of like the reading, that I get my first reading like bias of the story out of the way. And I don't know if it happens to y'all, but a book is generally very different on the second and third read compared to the first one. So more to the point, yeah, there's plenty of action balanced with slower, more conversational stuff to hold you over while traveling to different places. And there are a lot of different places too. There's like the inside of a planet, the inside of a void whale, there's a maiden world, there's a craft world, and plenty of spaceships. So I'd go on, but you kind of get the point. There's nothing to do with any real, actual important narrative though. So again, you'll have to settle with a self-contained story that takes place within the setting. We'll throw in an aside before heading into like the review proper. The question about how to read the 40K books kind of pop up quite a bit. The best suggestions I have to find is to like find an author that you like and just read all of those books. While yes, there isn't like a specific chronology or structured narrative per se even within like an author, authors do tend to create their own bubbles of narrative within the wider setting itself. So like some examples are Dan Abnett's like Eisenhorn, Ravener, Beckwin like storyline. There's like novellas, like in this specific example, there's 9 main books, and then, or there will be 9, because Beckwin's getting a third sometime in the next like decade. I don't know. But there's 8 books already, and then there's like a few novellas, and it's old enough to where there's like a published chronology of how you should read the like Eisenhorn experience. And then there's also my personal, I guess I wouldn't say favorite, but it is like a fun reading thing to kind of piece together. But there's Storm of Iron, the Uriel of Interest books, Priests, Lords, and Gods of Mars. Like if you read all those books, you can kind of see how they tie together to a degree. The Uriel of Interest ones, after Dead Sky, Black Sun, it really does just kind of move on. But up till, you kind of see how they tie together in a way. So yeah, to be honest, look for an author, but don't look for stop looking for the perfect place to start with 40K, because it just won't happen. There isn't a perfect. It's all disjointed. It's all just a mess, basically. And it's done that on purpose because that's not how the setting works. So, yeah. And with that aside over, review time. So the book itself starts very average. So I wouldn't like go in expecting to be having like a life-altering religious experience from start to finish, but it definitely picks up pretty fast. And I'm not like in not too long, you'll be invested in what's going on. I blame it on the stakes being established early and that the stakes themselves aren't so big that you find yourself immediately saying to yourself, well, like, okay, they're trying to destroy half the galaxy. So I guess, you know, that would end the setting. The protagonist is going to win because that can't happen. So it's a nice change of pace. Also, the Corsairs themselves like drop like flies. So there's a decent amount of like faces that are of varying importance throughout the story. So it's another thing that brings you into the story that is being told. As far as pros and cons go, I'll start with the cons and then end with the pros. So the fact that kin weren't given like more screen time kind of stung. That's happened like a few times now where the Votann are just like there. They're just present, doing Votann things for Votann reasons. Like in Hand of Abaddon, they appeared a little bit, but like I want more. I haven't read their main book yet, but when they do appear in stories, it's like, can you give them a little bit more presence? So yeah, they remain a like elf on the shelf material for now. Another con is like more of a pet peeve of mine than anything else, and people may or may not agree with me, but it's fine. It's my review. It's when like incredibly long-lived people die like super frequently and in like just droves. So like all I can think of when events like this happen is like, how did you make it to 300 or more years? When apparently death is as simple as like saying a wrong word to someone in passing or being poisoned at a dinner. Like I know it's a book and stakes have to be established, and usually stakes end up with like death and stuff like that. But if like the majority of your characters are like hundreds of years old and they're like dummy long lived, then I really wish that they didn't die so incredibly easily, because it's just like how did you get to your age if you can die by like a stubbed toe? Like I don't understand. So like I get the galaxy is dangerous, but if you're gonna start tossing centuries old ages like it means nothing, it makes me feel like most Eldar in this setting should be at max like 70, not like 500 or like 1,000 or something like that, or like edging on dummy old where you're starting to turn like into crystal because you're just that old. It's like, listen, I don't know if it's just the writing or like the setting itself or what, but like I don't think a lot of you should be as old as you are if you could just like have death by like hangnail. But yeah, so it's a minor thing, and I honestly struggle to call it a con, but I also found it a bit odd that Eldar like changed tack so quickly. So again, it's a book, I know, but character arcs can't reasonably take like, you know, half a decade to occur, yet it still like jumps out at me when a character is a lifelong something or other, and then in a few scenes they've completely done like a 180. So like you have a craft, and let's be specific and relate to the book that I'm actually reading instead of just like throwing baloney at a wall. With Tanar, he's, you know, a craft wielder, and he went renegade, and now he's a Corsair. And then like midway through the book, he's like a natural Corsair who's now fitting into the life, and he's such a natural at this. And I'm like, dude, look, I've met old people, okay, and I know Eldar aren't human beings, but that's my reference point. And I'm just saying, 80-year-olds don't like change, okay? And if you're telling me that that Eldar are like much older than 80, I just cannot understand how that's possible to like have that level of like personality shift if you're that old, you know? Like I've met old people, they don't do that. So yeah, again, it's a book, and this is my own personal pet peeve, but still, like, it's weird when stuff like that happens. But anyway, that was my last kind of con, if you even want to call it a con, because some people don't even care. Some people are just like, bro, stop thinking about too hard. Like, characters are just characters. They need to actually do stuff in the book. They can't just like be realistic all the time. But yeah, so anyways, Mike Brooks being the author is like a pro in and of itself, because genuinely all of his work is at worst good and at best amazing. So yeah, I don't know. I really like the work that he puts out. For another, when it comes to the orcs and Eldar, he does both of them like justice, because it's really easy to make orcs suck and also like boring. I don't know how, but like you can. And he's the best Eldar writer there is, in my opinion. He makes them not only tolerable but like genuinely fun to be around. And to be story specific, I very much enjoyed seeing more of like Eldar society. So it's not, I've said this like a gajillion times, but it's truly, and if for you Eldar fans, I feel very sorry for you, but it is not common that they dominate a story, even when it's like actually about them. The Corsairs seem like the most relatable Eldar. I want to throw that in there, because like genuinely, I was like, wow, you guys are not boring to read about, like, or obnoxious. They are a lot more rough around the edges and breaking from the norms of being like overly cryptic or edgy or like way too stoic. Which is nice, since that like makes the characters all have kind of breathing room to actually seem unique, because there's a large cast and they all seem like they have their own personalities and they're doing their own thing because they're given that breathing room. Whereas like most Eldar put in their traditional roles just seem, they don't have personalities because they're so stoic all the time, and they all typically are just like the same pretty much. So yeah, the Corsairs do seem like they have stuff happening in their lives and that they are actually different from each other, which is nice. The orcs, like genuinely just existing in the story is a huge pro. I love me some orcs. They are refreshing and fun, since they maintain a like it's never that deep. Don't think about like too much about it, but also in a way they can surprise you, because especially in like the Grotsnik book, the orcs do have a much more like fundamentally deep reason for existing, and they do pose kind of like existential questions about like both themselves, their purpose, and like what they're doing here basically, and like what they represent. So I like the fact that they have that kind of like dual purpose of just kind of being the galaxy's jokesters, but also being more if there's a writer that can actually kind of tease that deeper aspect out of them without being like, ugh. One more con that I forgot to mention until now, but it's like the way the actual book ended. So I'm talking about the ending. So obviously there's spoilers. Yeah, so if you want to click away, do so now. If you don't care about spoilers, then fine. But anyway, I loved how the book's like first pseudo ending happened, with Myrin being betrayed by Taenar on orders from like Farseer Carmen because of like the skein, like Farseers doing Farseer things for Farseer reasons. That was great. I was into it. I was so excited. I was like, oh my god, they're actually gonna pull like a twist, like Eldar screwing other Eldar over ending. I was like, this is amazing. Usually I see like humans, just like a whole world getting abandoned by Harlequins laughing in the wind, but it's like, no, they did it to other Eldar, and I was like, oh my god, I'm here for it. Like, surprisingly, that made me, I was like, now I'm doubly invested. And then the twist that isn't a twist, because they'd been building it this entire time, Taenar was like, actually, I love being a Corsair, and I love Myrin. And I was just like, ah, okay, I guess. And then, so yeah, a change of heart later, and then boom, we get the classic, like, because let's not be like super hyperbolic. This wasn't a great ending, and by that I mean it wasn't like uplifting it by any means, because like hundreds of Eldar died and ships got like exploded left, right, and center. So like a lot of people lost their lives, but at the same time you did have like the semi-classic, there is still a glimmer of hope, and like there's some humanity in the darkest of places, blah 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 ending. And I was just like, man, we could have had the Warhammer ending. We could have had the good one. So yeah, all in all, that being said, I do recommend this book to anyone wanting like a new Warhammer 40K book to like sink their teeth into that wasn't written in like 2010. Oh my God. I can't even believe I am not a decade and a half ago in the reading chronology right now. Holy crap. I'm so used to reading books that were like a gajillion years old published and then being like, do you guys remember this dusty old tome? I read it when it was published. Like, I hate that. But we're in 2025 with this one. This is crazy. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys, got something out of this. If you didn't, RIP, I guess. You wasted 30 minutes of your life. But if you did, yay, I did my job. I don't know. I do know, actually. I do know what next book I'm doing. I am going to do Tomb World. And then I'm going to do Remnant Blade. And then if nothing interesting has come out, a deep dive on Grotsnick. So, yeah, you have that to look forward to. Very exciting, very interesting. But yeah, thanks for listening. I will see you guys in the next video, hopefully in a week. But I don't know. This next week is spooky for me, so I don't know. Yeah, anyway, see you around.